Okay. I'm Matt Gaywin with Russ Bassett. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to participate in your meeting. The purpose of this lunch presentation will be to review opportunities for reducing risk in terms of the 911 service delivery that the facility plays a small part of, but we'll talk through some of the various enhancements that can be made as you go through these modernization projects that happen, every 10 years, 15 years, sometimes in shorter intervals, sometimes longer. But when they do happen, be it if it's a new building, it's one thing, but if it's a modernization of an existing space, it's another. And there are a lot of opportunities for, just to check a lot of things off the list that are on the radar. So if you can change the slide, there we go. The focus that we'll work through will be on some of the reasons for facility modernizations to happen in the PSAP context. So reliability is one that we'll spend quite a bit of time. You obviously, in some of the conversation that's already happened today, touched on a few issues that are related. We'll talk about capacity. That's often a driver for doing a modernization project, needing more console positions for people to take 911 calls and dispatch first responders from. We'll talk about operational efficiency, which is one of the big ticket items that you can start to, again, check off some goals as you're working through these projects. And we'll talk about how the facility modernizations can affect the health and well-being of the people that work in the center and do the work that we're all here to support. So one of the first places that we hit as it relates to the reliability of the PSAP Operations Center, the electrical systems are part of a key. It's a key challenge in any project is to make sure that those are done right. Communication systems are part of the equation. The facilities themselves, in terms of the room, the lighting, the sound, the space, and then how the technology is handled at the console in the back room. Those are all elements of any given modernization project that get touched. So if we can go ahead and change the slide, and we'll spend some time talking about the electrical systems. This is a super crude diagram, but having redundant power to the PSAP Operations Center is a critical requirement, and it's rarely overlooked back of house. Typically the server room is covered. You've got various stakeholders that make sure there's backup generated power and UPS power there. But if you were going to build a new building, okay, most commonly what you're going to see in a mission critical operations center is, if you're starting from scratch, you might have two different utility feeds. So literally coming from different, geographic directions into your building. You might have 2 generators, 3 generators, depending on the project, design team. People take different approaches to this. But where you literally, if you lost one generator, you had another that could handle the full power requirement of the building. You'd have an automatic transfer switch between those. Those would feed into the facility, and then you'd have 2 different UPS systems. So we had a little bit of we're working off of a Chromebook here for the slide deck. So some graphics are covering up some words, but these the darker bits in the middle with the battery symbols that you're seeing on the screen represent UPS systems, centralized UPS systems. So you have redundant generators, redundant UPS battery backup systems, an automatic transfer switch between those, feeding out a bath of fully redundant power to the console. And what we see in terms of what's out there in the PSAP spans all kinds of different configurations. Generators are almost always in place, but it's not very common that there are 2. The UPS systems, it's hit or miss. Sometimes there's a centralized UPS, sometimes there's not. If there is, sometimes it's just feeding some of the equipment. But as you work through, as a PSAP works through a modernization project, there's the opportunity to clean this up and to involve your team to really understand, is the power at our consoles redundant or not? And do we need it to be? Typically you would want it that way, but at least understanding what you've got is important. You can do the next slide.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, please.
So we recently consolidated multiple PSAPs, and in that process, remodeled the entire 3rd floor of the building that former fire PSAP was in. And, in all this great design work, all this stuff with power, the one thing they forgot was that the bathroom's not on the operational floor. So when power goes out, there's no lighting in the bathrooms for
Yeah.
folks to go.
That's been fixed.
Yeah, it's fixed, but that's an afterthought.
Yeah, it's and there's the distinction between, you know, the backup generator power and the UPS power, and obviously, really ideally, on the subject, the entire facility would be backup generated. There would be, like to your point, sir, there would be no part of the building, including the bathroom, that you couldn't use for extended period of time on generator fuel. And then where it gets even more complex is with the, you know, the UPS needs to feed certain things. And sometimes you'll see there might be two UPSs, okay, redundant theoretically, right? But then they're just going in a straight shot. And so this picture that you're seeing on the screen here has got, if you look at the center of it, you're seeing where there are circuits coming into this console from a raised access floor. Sometimes they're coming from underfloor, sometimes they're coming from the wall, sometimes they're coming from the ceiling, but the power is going into that console position. You're looking at the back of a PSAP console. And here you've got those red outlet boxes, source electrical J boxes. One of those is like theoretically circuit A and one circuit B. And then this big vertically rack-mounted box that you're seeing to the left of those is an automatic transfer switch that's at the console. Sometimes the ATS is upstream. Like when you're building a new building, it's more common that automatic transfer switching is all happening behind the scenes, and you've got a fully redundant stack of power at the PSAP operations floor, of UPS power. But in some cases, it makes more sense to put that ATS at the console. It tends to be less expensive. You have more potential failure points, but it's just, it's one way that it's done. But the key is that there is that, if you have multiple UPS circuits, you want to have the switching functionality done, or potentially alternate consoles with A and B power. Because let's say you lost the UPS, and you had two different UPS circuits going to a console, you could lose, I lost my radio computer and my CAD monitors. It's got to be thought out. And so this is one of the parts of the project that tends to be, like more challenging, but it's something that's worth thinking through as you go through it. Get the next slide. Grounding is an electrical issue that, in some places it's an issue, in some places it's not in terms of understanding the impact. But there's both, there's the static grounding, which has, Russ Bassett we're a console furniture manufacturer, and under the Motorola R56 ground standards, our furniture has to be static grounded, like you static ground a raised access floor or a server rack, which is what those two pictures you're seeing are there. And then there's the isolated grounding, and again, isolated grounding typically gets owned. That's like the bus bar you're seeing for the radio equipment. That stuff is usually owned by the radio contractor, and it's always done right, like a lot of times the server rooms are. But it's the rest of the picture. It's more of if you were building a building and following the R56 standards with an electrical engineer, you'd start to pick up a lot more. Things can get overlooked, and if the grounding's not done right, you could, fry not just like in a lightning strike, you could fry not just radios, but other stuff at the console. So it's just very important. You're doing a project, that you get these opportunities to check the box, because if you had lightning strike and you lost the 911 phone by accident, that affects the service delivery reliability. Go to the next slide. There's an architect named Jan Laurent that lives in Phoenix, where I live, and we worked with him on the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office project a few years ago, which is not that building image I put up, but he gave a quote related to NFPA 1221 that said, there is this neutral baseline by which you can evaluate your facility. So for people that feel like, hey, we need some kind of meat to be able to go to our political leadership with, to say we need to do something, and here's why. This NFPA 1221, and I'm not pretending to be an expert on that, we're not an architect, but I appreciated his comment that it's this neutral baseline by which you can evaluate your facility, and it speaks to things like not just the facility, reliability, but how susceptible is it to hazards and disasters, be they man-made, be they natural. So it's talking about things like standoffs for blast radiuses and foundation types and stuff like that, which is all over my head, but that's there. The construction materials that are used, the way that the HVAC systems feed the building so that you can't potentially get, someone putting some kind of poisonous into your air supply, fire protection, security. But in that, a lot of the pieces, like in the construction methodologies and stuff, a lot of the reliability issues are there. So it might be a helpful guide to be aware of as you work through what reliability looks like, what needs to be done. Keep that NFPA 1221 in your back pocket as a potential resource to give you, some content to go to the political leadership with. And then at the console position, so again, in terms of, we're talking about the reliability of the service delivery. That's a picture from about 18 months ago, what it looked like at the Dallas Police Department's 911 call taking area, where it's just it's not uncommon for us to see scenarios like this where you have a PSAP console and the computers are in the footwell. There's cables dangling everywhere. The power's plugged in right there. That call taker sitting at that desk could put their foot up in the wrong way and disconnect something. They could potentially lose a 911 call over it. So and that's just, so it's something that it's a serious, the way that, as it relates to enhancing the reliability of our PSAPs and of the service delivery that they provide, we've got to take that seriously, and the consoles can't look like that. So that's a big part of where we're involved. You go to the next slide, please, Daryl. It's hard to see, but that's their new position, and so they had some unfortunate issues occur as a result of their failing facilities and challenges with their staff, and they did a modernization project where they went with relatively basic, small console positions, but compared to what they came from, they got sit-stand console furniture where everything was inside. They couldn't put their foot up and disconnect anything, and it just looked clean. So it's doable to solve that part of the reliability equation with just console furniture. Get the next slide, please. That's what it should look like in terms of the footwell area of a proper console. There shouldn't be any exposed cabling or something like that, so that your people don't have to worry about the disconnects. If you can do that next slide, please, Bill. And then in terms of the inside of the furniture, everything wants to have a home. Everything wants to have the cables dressed properly. Ideally, the cables would be labeled so that you could speed up when there is an issue with a piece of equipment. Even just the label at both ends can allow for either the staff member or the IT support or the vendor that's there supporting you to identify what the cable is, what it's connected to. So everything can have a home, have a place, cables can be labeled, cables can be dressed, and that all goes back to increasing the reliability of the PSAP Operations Center. Another driver for doing these projects is capacity. So a lot of times, especially if it's a modernization in place, you're not blowing out any walls, you're not getting any more real estate, you're not moving. Capacity can be a challenge. You're seeing on the screen just different operation centers, different layouts. There's different shape of consoles, different size of consoles. There isn't a right or wrong way to lay out an operation center, but it's sometimes a driver of, hey, we've got this space. We need to go from, for example, like in Bale's case, you need to go from 6 positions to 8. So just go to the next slide, Daryl. So this is on the left. What you're seeing was their space with 6 positions, and then a few years ago they modernized, and now they went to 8. So that's a driver of these modernization projects. So this could be the driver, but then we could go back and get the electrical system right, get the grounding right. So that's where these modernization projects have the opportunity. The driver might have been capacity, and then you went and got your UPS figured out as part of the project. And then just on the subject of capacity, we're always saying, well, how many seats do I need to have to do the job at the PSAP? But then it's like, what about the backup center? Is there a backup? Where do we go? And I know in the case of 911 communications, a lot of times you can just flip the make busy switch and go to you'll have someone else back you up. But some of the other markets that we serve, like power utilities, for example, It's them. They have to own it. So there'll be literally mirror operation centers of their, whether it's transmission control, distribution control. They can plug out of one and be at the other and be back in business in terms of the brain or nerve center of the organization. So it's a trend that we're seeing to be taken more seriously in the 911 community about having a proper backup center. So just think about that as part of that equation. And sometimes if you're going to you made the comment earlier, Monica, about going for funding. Like if you've got to go for funding for something, it might want to include, if I was going to have to go get $100 grand, maybe I go get 130, and I just figured out, or if I was going to go for 200, maybe I go for 300, whatever it is. You just try to rope in as much of these issues as you can. As it relates to operational efficiencies that can be gained through modernization projects, when you do these, you have the opportunity to rethink your layout. You have the opportunity to rethink what's the best workflow among your people. You think about lines of sight, think about new functionalities you might want to bring into a center. So if you're just replacing, console furniture, for example, which is a common driver of these modernization projects, hey, this stuff's 10 years old, it's time, or monitors have changed, it's time. But there's opportunities to really change things up. If you can go to that next slide, Daryl. Here are some examples of layouts where, maybe instead of having the 4-pod, it becomes a 6-pod with the supervisor outboard, or if you go to that next one, maybe there's different shapes and sizes that are evaluated that open up different lines of sight. And this is going to vary in terms of this is how I set call takers, dispatchers, supervisors, this agency, that agency. But when you do the modernization project, you have the opportunity to rethink the way that you've always done business and potentially come up with, just new thinking and a new way it can be done. One thing to keep in mind on that subject is you can't see over the second row of monitors. It's just one of the things we try to always be out there educated on as it relates to lines of sight, supervisor placement, teamwork. You can't see over the second monitor. When you stand up, like that guy on the left, that guy's like 6'8". He's standing up. You still can't see over his monitors because they go up with him. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking through layouts and envisioning how you can set up your teams, that you want to try to create environments where if you need line of sight, you have it. A classic thing that happens is you build a supervisor platform and you have stacked monitors in front of the supervisor so that they can't, hey, we've got a nice big room and we just put this raised floor in one step higher than the rest, but the supervisor can't see out. What was the point of the raised platform? So they're just these, just a fun fact to throw in. Other some examples of new functionalities that can be brought in, there's obviously more monitor real estate coming to PSAP for various reasons. That applies both at the console position level. It also applies at the room. So these projects are good times to think through, do we need a quote-unquote video wall? Do we just need to distribute some large screens around? We're seeing more and more municipal security monitoring fall on the PSAP. There's talk about real-time crime centers and should they go in the PSAP or nearby. So there's a lot of this is going to vary by agency as well in terms of what's on the radar, what's on people's priority list. But these projects are opportunities to fold some of that in and make it new functionalities. Can even be some of this more simple, console furniture type features like a status indicator light, where in a larger agency, maybe it's tied into their automatic call distribution system, and it shows when, someone's not ready, or someone's, and even in a smaller agency, it can show when someone's on a call. So I don't walk in, but hey, how's your day going? You have to tell me I'm on a call because you're on a headset, and I wouldn't have noticed that. So there's just opportunities for new functionalities to be brought into the mix as these projects happen. And then as it relates to health and well-being, again, it's time to rethink what we've been doing, what our needs are. Things like ADA compliance, especially in older, smaller facilities, can often be overlooked. We're roped into that primarily from a layout perspective, but there may be other parts of the facility that need some quick cleanup that you could fold in. There are a lot of times missing rooms. Like, if we were building a new building, we want a quiet room. It can dual as a lactation room. So like maybe like Mesa Police Department as an example, just did a modernization project there in the Phoenix area where I live, 30 position PSAP, and as part of it, they were able to get a quiet room, which they didn't have, and a conference room, which they didn't have on that op center floor footprint. So there's these things to be thinking through as it relates to the space, making sure you've got people, able to come to work, be comfortable, do what needs to be done, get a quiet break if needed. There's lighting, sound, the actual furniture itself, ergonomic interface, the cleanliness of the space, and then the opportunity to increase the pride of ownership among your team are some of these things that you can also solve for as you go through these projects. So lighting, this is, again, it's not table stakes that people are going to have dimmable LED lighting in the PSAP. So a lot of times you walk in and it's some kind of nasty on-off fluorescent light. You ideally want to have some kind of multiple light sources, or at a minimum a nice like dimmable LED lighting system, so that especially for the night shift, those lights can go down dim. So in the picture there you're seeing that's a power utility control center, but they've got a perimeter LED light band that just gives a little bit of a neat feel, but casts quite a bit of the ambient lighting around the room. You've got direct and indirect halogen and LED light strips up top that are dimmable and independent. So you can get really complex like that, or it can be as simple as just coming in and replacing the old 2x4 fluorescent squares with the goofy plastic beaded covers to just a basic LED fixture that's dimmable now. So again, check that off the list. Sound is an issue. You can't make sound go away in an operations center. The only way to really stop sound is to put up floor-to-ceiling partitions. The furniture itself can absorb a little tiny bit of the sound if there's fabric-clad soundboard integrated. Your biggest bang, unintended, is going to be your floor covering material and your ceiling material and design. So those are where you're trying to absorb the sound. You can't block it. We can have it bounce around a little bit, whether you have stacked monitors or taller partitions, but unless you're going floor to ceiling, you're not going to stop that sound. It's there. You're trying to absorb it, and there are trade-offs. So like carpet is the least durable. It collects particulates and organisms, but it's also comfortable underfoot, quiet. It looks good at first. The ceiling is a challenge, and that starts to become, again, in the new building, like that's the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I mentioned that architect Jan Moran had designed. And when you're doing a new building, it's easy to think through some kind of neat, well thought out, acoustic ceiling. And in a modernization, you can't, but you could do things like upgrade the ceiling tiles to be the top, most noise reduction, the highest noise reduction coefficient possible, highest quality acoustic grid, or not the grid, but just the tiles, right? So there's little things that you can do to try to make that better for the people working at the consoles. Console furniture, I'm not going to spend any time on that, but just, that's got to be right. The monitor configuration, the creature comforts, it's got to be right. So it's something that you want to look at and spend time on. Obviously, we'd be happy to talk to anyone that wanted to about that. Back to cleanliness and finished materials. So just finishing up. So that's carpet. You can make carpet look really good, but like we talked about, carpet can just be, it can be nasty. And it's something that you've got to be committed to cleaning it. You've got to be committed to replacing it. That is a room there where they went with, it's 500 positions at the American Airlines Integrated Operations Center in Fort Worth, and they want, it's a really large room. There's not the opportunity there to have a whole lot of wall paneling for sound, because you can have your floor covering, your ceiling, or the big bang. You can do some wall paneling where it fits in, and then you can do, you can have fabric-clad soundboard at the furniture. But there's this trade-off again with wherever the fabric's at, it's collecting particulates. So that can be an issue in terms of the ability to keep places clean. And if you can change slides. So on the idea of the modernization project and opening up opportunities for just making it a better and overall environment, falling into the health and well-being of the people that work there. When you open up an old raised access floor, which many PSAPs are going to be sitting atop, there could be all kinds of abandoned cabling, be it electrical, communications cabling. Now, these are the times to clean it out. It's just, when you modernize, you get the console furniture out, you can get to do some new finishes, get all the old abandoned stuff out. At the same time, clean it. Don't just take out the stuff, clean it, because you can see in this picture here on the left, it's not just that there's abandoned stuff, really, it's definitely, and sometimes there could be also critters and stuff under there. So it's the time to get that cleaned up. Yep. And
we should take a picture of that. Did we?
I don't think we took a picture of that. Mr. Constant wants to
It was like petrified. Petrified. Yeah.
It was like the whole beast.
how did it get down there is what I want to know.
I did put mouse traps underneath one, so I had a dispatcher supervisor, we won't name. That's one of those.
Oh.
Was it Lincoln?
He said he wasn't going to name him.
Well, then all of a sudden, you hear the thing go off in his hands, and the room loses it. And then it was like, he's reaching, I told everybody, guys, we got him under the floor, so he reaches his hand down there, man, and you just hear this snap. And I start laughing.
So this is the time. I think we had someone from AdCom on the phone when they took this seriously when they did their project. They moved their operations center down to their training room. They gutted, they pulled up all the tiles, they stripped out all the old abandoned cabling, cleaned underfloor. It's more challenging if you don't have a full temporary operation center you can go to. If you're trying to do a live cutover where you're doing segments, it's harder. But it's just, if you can fit it in, it's worth doing that. Can you go back with just a quick slide? And then keeping it clean after you do your project. There are companies out there, whether it's your console furniture provider or otherwise, there are companies out there that do both underfloor cleaning and do console cleaning. That's like a detailing, so you can keep your stuff, looking new. And even if you're doing that once every 2 years, you'd be ahead of the large majority of the centers that are out there.
In the last several years, that's been great.
Yeah. Yep. That's something that's worth doing.
I think it definitely helps even cut down on the sickness.
Yep.
I mean, we had, when you start, we make jokes about it, but they were they were petri dishes. I mean, really, it's what our comms
Like up air conditions.
There's the day-to-day cleaning business,
Right.
which everyone's always going to do, and then there's the deep cleaning stuff, like the carpet segment. There's the carpet cleaning. There's if you really have a nasty underfloor plenum, it's the actual. There are people that will come in and do the detailing under your floor. It's the console, detailing. So it's good to keep up. And then in terms of just like pride of ownership, just something to share, you get the chance to bring in, that's Dallas PD's call taker area on the top left and bottom. And again, they went with a super basic console for their call takers. You saw the picture what they were coming from. About 6 zeros on their floor. The PD dispatch area hasn't been hit yet. We still got to get that funded. But fire got upgraded. But for the call takers, they got just basic sit-stand console furniture and some personal convenience outlets. No task lights, no cooling fans, no forced air heaters. But from what they came from, it's awesome. And they did put a little money into that edge glazing that you're seeing with the logo etched into it and lit. And when the dispatchers, and they got a quiet room out of it, and they did the whole clean out. They got new lighting, new carpet. So I mean, for the call takers that work in that DPD room, it's a big deal, and they call it Club 911. But it just shows because that's when you walk in, what you see on the bottom there. It's an opportunity to increase the pride of ownership, and that in my opinion has an impact on the reliability of 911 service delivery. People are coming to work. They're they're saying positive things about where they want to be there. So it's just things are worth doing.
Where is the blue light across the ceiling coming from?
It's actually coming out of that, because in that room, the lights are down dim, like we were talking about.
Coming out of the glass?
It's actually coming out of our glass, yeah. Because that glass is uplit,
Okay.
and it's kind of catching that. So it's like a 10-foot ceiling. It's not a real high ceiling.
Just having a pleasant place to work has to help with turnover rate, I would think.
That's what I'm saying. The good stuff, the power systems play into it, the people play into it, and the way the cabling then plays into it. So this is all, it's a serious business, and these are not easy projects. If you go to the next slide, please. These are not easy projects. You've got to have the vision. You've got to have you gotta come up with a game plan, you have to get the money, you have to figure out the budget. I didn't have to say the word team up there in this list, but as it relates to the vision, the planning, the budget, you've got to collaborate with a team of people. You've got your equipment vendors, you've got your IT support, you've got your facilities, you've got political leadership. There's all these people that have to be part of this to make it work well. And I'm not just talking about in a new building. I'm obviously in a new building, but in the modernization of an existing space, if it's going to be more than just, oh, we're going to buy a few more, we're going to get some new consoles, you've got to get, you know, all these people, you've got to build consensus, and you want to get the budget right. You get your vision, you come up with a plan, then you do your budget. What is our vision for what we're going to do, and then how much is it going to cost? Because if you're going to go to your chief or sheriff or whoever else, or authority board, executive director for the grant, for the money, it's like you want to just be able to go one time. Like, here's what we want to do, here's what we need, here's the menu. You know, here's the things we consider to be, we're doing these. Here's some things we could give on. Maybe we don't need to do the wall acoustic treatment or the underfloor clean. You know what I mean? But you come with a good, clear plan, and then you make it happen. And it takes time. And we see most PSAPs fall in the 10 to 15 year mark. And if you're in that range, if you're at year 7, start planning it now. Start thinking about it. You know, start coming up. And sometimes they happen sooner, sometimes they happen longer. But the typical, and we kind of the way we see it is like a modernization happens, and then a new building, and then a modernization and a new building. Sometimes you'll get 2 modernizations out of one building. That's kind of the sequence of it, you know. All right, here we go. Just real quick, there's a lot of moving parts. This is that Mesa PD project that I mentioned. That's their schedule. It's 5 phases. They stayed live. They did a couple phases in the call taker area, the supervisory area, and a couple phases in the dispatcher area. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of action items. But you know, I think if you called them up, we were just over there having lunch on Tuesday, hosting another prospective customer there, and I think it's painful. They just got done. The schedule ends. This is just July 3rd, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Go to the next slide. And then some of the challenges that we see, just again back to the building consensus and with getting a team in place. You know, a lot of times, just having the support, political support, facility support. A lot of times, facilities, you can't do that. You can't put dimmable lighting in there. It's like, well, why not? I mean, why not? So that's where the NFPA 1221 document can sometimes come into play if you really need to do something and you're not getting the kind of support you need. You can try to get a view on that. Funding's always an issue, so you start early. Start looking at what it's going to cost you 3-4 years ahead of time, at least 18 months ahead of time. That way you can get the time to get it. No one's going to be shocked about it, you know. Staffing for everybody, you know, time is a premium for everybody, so that's just an issue. So be thinking about, do you have, with your team, is there someone that can help you with it? Like Jennifer, I think you kind of led, when you guys did your modernization, you kind of led that effort. So it's just, you know, because you got on your plate, right? Yeah, so it's like, how do you find a stakeholder that can kind of run and be the point person? And then real estate's always a challenge too. You can't make, you know, sometimes you have the room to do things nice and sometimes you don't, but be thinking about if it's like, hey, this room over here is not being used well or for anything, and my PSAP's here, do we blow that wall out? I mean, would it be that big of a deal? And if you have the vision and you have the clear need, just one of the things, just real, you know, so you know, the console furniture sizes are driven by the monitor configuration first and foremost. So, and monitor real estate has continued to increase, like we said, at the position. So they're getting bigger, which means you need a bigger room. So sometimes that can be part of it too. So thank you for your time. If you go to the next slide, that's just the opportunity to, if we want to talk about any of those particulars.
I have a question. 2 questions.
Am I right?
Are you guys seeing, as a console furniture manufacturer, have you guys started to see anything heads-up kind of display because of the kind of real estate monitors are taking up? I have not seen anywhere that has that, but I was wondering if it's on your guys' radar.
Define what did you tell me?
Like a virtual, like a heads-up display instead of having monitor screens.
Instead of.
Yeah, so, you know, like it's not a traditional monitor. It's like a heads-up, like, you know, like the crap they actually can transmit in your vehicle on the windshield.
Yeah, and some words not yet. Not yet. But there's, you know, has anyone seen the movie Minority Report? You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Tom Cruise. And he's like,
Yeah.
I remember sitting at the table with this is like 2012 or 13, the police captain from Chicago. I can't react his accent, heavy Chicago accent. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to, it just, they're signing the drawings for their project that's like 30 positions, and nothing's changing.
Yeah.
I want just one piece of glass. And it's like, that's where eventually it probably will head. Right now, you're starting to see there is a trend to move towards large screen displays. So, if you were to go to Denver 911, for example, they have their CAD, majority of CAD, I think we have one screen of CAD off of the large screen, but they have a 42 or 43, one of those two, at each position in front of, as the primary monitor. And a lot of people, Mesa PD did the same thing. A lot of people have been testing that and liking it. There are trade-offs.
Right.
220.
Touch screen.
No, it just, and and I believe you can get them configured so that you've got, when you log in, it remembers your favorites for all your windows and whatnot. Well, they could speak to whether they like it or not, but that's something that we've seen people testing and liking. One of the challenges is that, we try to represent it on the phone, West, I mean.
Well, they're back to
So they're going to give you the 911 phone product, and most often they're going to give you the monitors with it. Harris, Motorola, Zetron, they're going to give you the radio product, and they're going to give you the monitors with it. So you're the customer. The PSAP is the customer. They're in control ultimately, and if you have a vision, you can do interesting things. In the power utility space, they're, a lot of times have more of a control. Like, it's not like, here's the stuff. They're like having to figure what it is. And you're starting to see, like, what are quote unquote KVMs type solutions where you might have two large screens that are feeding multiple computer sources into it and then transmitting those screens. Because the key is, like, we've had pieces like, we're going to go with 342s. And we're like, well, how are you? Well, one for the radio, one for the 911 phone, and one for a CAD. I'm like, well, you don't need your radio to be this big. You know what I mean? It just doesn't need to be. But you are starting to see that happen. And it's been playing out. Like, we just did a project for Norfolk Southern Railroad, and they're in Atlanta, and they have 343s. And then they have a desk-sitting tab. It's like a 19-inch 4x3, which is for them is like their radio and phone all in one. They call it the Class 1 device, Class 1 Railroad, like telecom tool. So just picture 343s, and then this bit. And they're wearing headsets. Those dispatchers, they can kill people like that. They can crash trains. I mean, it's like 911 in terms of its intensity level. It's different.
Right.
But so that's happening. But you can't go higher than the two monitors.
Right.
You can't go up. It's way too much neck strain. So you're limited. That's when you're designing a PSAP operations center, newer modernization of existing space. That's the very first question we're asking is, what's your vision for the screen real estate? And we tend to share a lot of pictures from other centers in terms of what they're doing, because it does vary. Like, not everyone's like the 42, 43 screens.
Were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just going to mention we're doing some of the KVMs in two of my PSAPs where it's not the old KVM where it was, you're clicking a keystroke or pushing a button to switch. It's when your mouse pans across the monitor to a certain window, your keyboard, your mouse, and your video becomes that computer.
Wow.
While you still see the rest.
And that's an excellent solution, and that now is almost table stakes. The old pushing buttons or clicking hotkeys is kind of a thing of the past. Now wherever your mouse goes, that's where your keyboard goes. And KVMs are wonderful. That type of KVM switching solution is wonderful for decluttering the work surface. We're a big proponent. We don't make those, but it's like part of the technology we sell for it. But they help make a nicer console. What I'm speaking to is actually it's like an interface that you could send it CAD, radio, and 911, and then you configure. You say you have your 343s, right? The big old desk 343s. You tell it where those. Now instead of it being a computer to a monitor, which is kind of how the paradigm is today, you can actually have a big wall of monitor in front of you.
Or it could just be multiple computers on one monitor?
Yeah, so like Dell has as a standard, Dell has like they call it like the P43, something Q, and it's like you can put up to four computers on that one screen. They've got 4 inputs for different computers to go. So it's kind of like the next step into Monica's plan. We're not at Minority Report yet, where you can put your goggles on, which may come, but just it's not there yet, right? It's right now. You're limited by there is a screen, but you can now we're starting to see multiple. Sometimes, multiple large screens and multiple PCs feeding that video display. Yeah.
Have you seen any PSAPs using the curved monitors that are out there now?
That
It seems
curved
like that would be a good use of that KVM technology.
Yeah, and that's where you're seeing that vision of like the 3 screens. They're typically curved. Norfolk Southern, their perspective was the curves are going away for some reason. The curved screens aren't as curved as you think of them.
Right.
No.
It's like the outboard side, but that does help because one of the negative trade-offs of a large screen, if you have 2 24-inch screens, when you're setting up a console, you're trying to maintain perpendicularity with all your screens, which should be a challenge. But that's the goal. So everywhere you look, it's square on. You're not like looking at some awkward angle. This is the idea of being I look at it, square on. If you have 2 24s, which is about the width of a 42-inch widescreen, they're going to always have some kind of angling happening, if that makes sense. So you've got a 42, and those very outboard edges can feel a little awkward. And the same thing happens, perpendicularity also applies like vertically. So in terms of your tilt, like if your monitor's up a little higher, you want that second screen, stacked screen, which is 42 or 43, like 2 24s, stacked as well, a little bit lower. But you still have this issue where the very bottom of it and the very top of it feel a little far away. Because they're not, if they were 24s, you'd have some tilt built into it. So but there are all these trade-offs, and it's a fun part of the conversation that we get, get to have and share.
I have one more question, Matt. You guys are a U.S. corporation, yeah?
Yeah, Russ Bassett manufactures in Southern California.
No, but I mean, you don't trade outside the U.S.?
We export.
Okay, so...
We're doing China Southern Airlines right now.
Okay,
We're
so
doing China
interesting
Southern Power,
thing, in Europe, they're starting to use these AI tools in the call take position. The craziest thing, I got my eye on it, and it looks like almost, the device looks like a lampshade, to oversimplify it, and it sits in the call take pod, and it actually listens in or cues in on the conversation, both sides of the conversation, to help make some decisions, right? Have you guys...
That's the first I've heard of it.
What's it doing, though?
It's making decisions
about what?
about the escalation of the call, the perceived condition of the caller.
Refer to the call taker as a coach?
Yeah.
It can. So it's being deployed in Europe in many of their 911 or 112 centers. And it's super interesting to watch, and I know there'll be some more information next year at ENA about it because it was like revolutionary this year at the conference.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, wow. So from a QA perspective, they're using it as a QA tool for the call taker, but from a caller perspective, they're actually using it. Is the call taker getting the medical diagnosis? Are they following the right train? Because there is medical science that says from the tone of your voice, they can tell your blood pressure, your anxiety, like all of these escalation factors. I was dumbfounded. But I'm just interested to see, like, oh my gosh, okay, so how's that going to be in there?
Is there like a pop-up or
So I didn't see all of that, so I'm going to bring some more information, but it is like, they're on the bleeding edge of this
Maybe you have to do your QA scores and send it to the call taker.
No. But I mean, so is artificial intelligence, are you guys starting to look at how that can interplay into your...
Not yet. It's not happening yet.
Yeah.
So far, it's like the pilot.
Okay.
It's like the dispatcher is the pilot.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Technology, like we're just this little sliver of what's
Right.
going to get worked out.
Right.
To me, that sounds like a piece of technology I got to figure out how to store.
Right.
How to like properly place it.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know if you'd heard anything about it in
No,
your
yeah,
space.
it's cool.
Yeah.
I know they have something like that in colleges. Some
Yeah.
colleges are testing out. So like it'll alert people if there's like a fight or an argument or something.
Yeah.
But it's keying off some
Kind
weird
of cool.
things.
I'm right.
Yeah, that's real cool.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
The KBM technology we're talking about with the single monitor, multiple computers, in some ways I've seen, because I've seen some manufacturers like, say, Motorola, you can get their CAD, their radio, and their call taking all on one PC, but when that single PC goes down, you've lost all capabilities at that console. So in a lot of PSAPs, you may have where they're not split. You only have call-taking duties at this one and only radio there, but if you have all the duties or capabilities at one console, if you lose radio, you can still use this as a call-taking station. So are there redundancies on power supply and that sort of thing for these KVMs to make sure that it's a little bit more of a
yeah, so that's another some of those solutions. Those are those trade-offs, Bruce. Your power supply. Let's just say, okay, that's checked off. The whole PSAP operations floor, any piece of technology is on UPS power. That's how it should be. You're building a new building. That's how it would be. So you would never lose power to that floor as long as there's diesel to keep filling up that generator outside. And the UPS systems are there. Nothing ever goes down, right? So check that off. But you do end up with this the KVM switch that you were describing, where you have, let's say, or here's a really common desktop configuration when a KVM is involved, but a full dispatch console. You have your radio computer, just leave it off. It's got the mouse and the keyboard's hidden somewhere else because the keyboard's almost never used. Okay, so you got on your desk, you got your radio mouse, you've got your hotkeys or 10-key device for the 911 phone system. Okay, that's a specialized set of keys there. Then you've got a mouse and a keyboard, and that mouse and keyboard now are tied into, if there's an admin computer, there's a 911 computer, and it's a CAD. So you've got now one mouse and keyboard for everything but the radio, you got your 10-key and your radio keyboard. That's a very common configuration, which is really clean. It's not that much happening right there. Versus the other opportunity to have up to 4 keyboards and 4 mice, right? However, the trade-off is if your KVM fails, which they can, we like them because they make the desk feel nicer, but we don't make them. So, but that becomes a failure point. If that KVM failed, you would now have lost your interface right there to those computers. Yeah. Okay. So you have some of that.
What KVM solution is the PSAP trying to use there that you're talking about?
We, in 2 of our PSAPs, we're using, I think it's a black box, but it's not what Matt's describing. This is the one where monitors are assigned to different computers, but you have one keyboard and mouse. So wherever you go across multiple monitors and different computers, that's where your keyboard gets assigned.
We're doing that, but we're doing it through Logitech keyboard and mice and Bluetooth connectivity. That's what we're doing on our consoles.
The technology came out in the Linux world, pre-open source world years ago, and actually it's coming around from even the server world. It allows you to load an application on there similar to like the Logitech's version of it now, and as long as they're on the same network, it then passes off as you pass from one machine to the other. Through the network, it makes that physical switch. But what also is coming around, and we see this a lot in the server world, we use them for remote KVMs. I can remote into a server based on that remote access, allowing me to switch between machines. And in doing that, I can actually have multiple machines going within the desktop that I'm using. And so the newer KVM stuff is kind of starting to integrate into my son's programming environment. That radio application is now just a window that sits on your CAD machine that floats. Right. You click in the window, click on your channel, and it automatically is controlling that radio PC because of the way that KVM is set up. So it's just now a floating window. You move around within your template system. So we're starting to see a lot more of that coming down to the desktop. We've had that in the server side of the world, but that technology is coming around. So I would perceive that type of thing. One keyboard and mouse, you're not trying to control based on switching and moving. That monitor, right. That system you're not utilizing every day or constantly switching. Application window that's...
And the screens I was describing when I was speaking before, I was addressing the keyboard mouse KVM type solution, but to Monica, this question about just the larger screens, integrating multiple computers, that paradigm still allows for the radio, 911, CAD, admin computers to sit at the console. It's just there's an interface now to a box, this type of KVMing solution that then is tied to the monitors, and it's like a combo software hardware solution that allows the dispatcher then to set up how their console would look. But again, you do every time this whole discussion, no matter which way you're going to cut this, you end up with the possibility for failure points. So it's one of those trade-offs that has to be thought through, because a KVM switch is a pretty simple device where if you could theoretically have a few on hand, you could just swap one out. But yeah, anytime you start reduce, you do end up with the potential for failure points. And even like cables, the fact that like a USB cable to technically is a failure point, and you've got one to connect every mouse and every keyboard back to the remote, or the PC at the console down in enclosures. So yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue that's got to be worked through. So it's good to just have. There's all these different ways it can be done, and it's good to work through understanding what the options are as people go through these projects. So.
Well, our experience actually is you can have too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
We did that where we integrated phone, CAD, and our business machine, and there was so much real estate with so many monitors that they would lose the mouse. They would, accidentally hit things that they didn't want, and they actually asked for it to go back.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
we actually had too much of a good thing. So there's, you can do overkill as well, so.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is typically people are going to leave the box. There was a trend for about, and then we'll wrap it up, I know it's a little bit over. There was a trend for remote locating PCs and following that KVM switching solution that you were describing, sir. There two things have happened. One, there was some lag time issues related to that people felt were unacceptable. And then two, so monitors have continued to increase in size, right, in quantity. But the computers are doing the opposite thing. So like one of these pictures we had up was the Barometric #1 Network District's new facility in San Antonio. They were a NENA tour site in 2017. Yeah. Beautiful, $80 million project, all in. That's not just the building. But they had built out some really massive, like, equipment enclosure rooms, server room type things, where they were going to remotely look at all the PCs. And when you build a building, it takes years, design and construction, right? By the time they were going to do that, they were like, well, we just got these micro PCs, and it's the whole computer. And we don't need to, why do we need, now we're not worried about space in enclosure. We'll just put that at the console.
They can go in the back of a monitor.
Yeah, they go in the back, they go back in the flat wall zone, or, on the array or whatever. So you end up with that we typically are seeing there's going to be, can continue to be at the console in mission critical operation settings, whether it's a railroad, utility, PSAP. You're going to have the computers at the position, but you are going to occasionally see these KVM switches that reduce the number of mice and keyboards for the dispatcher. But that does create, potential failure point. It does. So, okay, well, cool. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to visit with you, and I'll take my seat.
Is your contact information on the slide, or?
I'll
Because
send
Rest
that
does console, and they also do console cleaning. Is there anything else you guys do?
Yeah, we make console furniture, and for our customers primarily we do the care and detailing. But I'll send this slide deck as a PDF to Daryl.
Okay.
And I'll put my contact information on there, and then if it comes up, we're available. We're happy to drive, be anywhere in the state someone would need, whether it's the rural onesie twosie PSAP or it's the big operations centers in these pictures show, and we're there. So you just keep us, let us know, and we'll be happy to come out and visit. So I'll put that in for Daryl, and just for meeting notes or something. That's you.
Matt, are you seeing places do RFPs not specifically for a purchase, but for the business for the next several years for console replacements? So our authority funds the consoles for all 6 of the PSAPs, but I don't want to do RFPs each time one of them needs to do something. I'd like to do a single RFP with discounted pricing to do all of our work for the next 5 years.
That's a really good question. I think personally, because I work with a lot of PSAPs, that's where I spend most of my time, I would typically guide a prospective customer towards the utilization of a pre-competitively bid cooperative purchasing agreement. We have an HGAC by contract and there's all these different contracts in all these different places, right? But we have a contract with HGAC by which falls under the banner of 911 equipment, notification software, and services. And the banner of things that they cover includes console furniture. And they went out and sought bids, and it's a 2-year window. So every 2 years you have to recompete it. We've had it for the past 2 cycles, and we've done projects. Denver 911 as an example, they went out and looked around. They visited sites, they visited factories, they did their due diligence, and they ultimately did what looked like an RFP, but it was really like an RFE, request for estimate or something, where they got a proposal back, but the contracting authority was always going to come from HGAC by or another cooperative contract.
So it was
City and County
quote.
Yeah, the City and County never looked around. They shopped around, right? They made their decision based on various factors. But at the end of the day, the contracting authority was not based on that process. It was based on the cooperative vehicle. And that just takes a lot of pressure off. RFPs can get really involved, and A lot of times they're just not necessary. So, but if by policy an agency has to do it, then you do it. You do the best job you can. Don't just go grab, watts and spec off the internet or something. Write your own thing, and don't tie your hands to have to take the low number. Just do a real clear, like a performance-based specification for what your needs are. There's a high level of variation in the market between us and our competitors, and that's a good thing for the PSAP because they can decide what they want, and it's not confusing. So, hey, well, they make it that way, these guys make it this way, and they can decide what's the right fit. So cooperative contracting vehicles are the simplest way to do that. But yes, you could do an RFP that would have some kind of long-term pricing level established and stuff, but I think that if you're allowed to, if you can, by your governmental agencies' policies, utilize proper contract vehicles, that's the simplest way to do it.
Okay. And within those negotiated contracts, does it include the vendor coming out and measuring the facility,
Yeah, that should be, anyone that's not going to, we offer that, and I believe our competition on that as well. I can't say that for sure, but there's no we don't charge our existing or prospective customers for the engagement and design. We're there doing the visiting, the understanding, what we call the design phase, where you've got, we're visiting, we're talking, we're coming up with design proposals, budgets, helping you think through the project. That's all. There's value to it, don't get me wrong, but it's free, and we're doing it to the end that we would be the right fit. Our hope is we're the right fit. And then from there, it gets into more of the table gets bigger, where you you remember from when we did the project together, it was like the table starts to get bigger from there with all those team members we were talking about from your equipment vendors. So, yeah, there's no cost. Anyone that's trying to charge you to do that, you probably just want to go down your other contacts. Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Technology. I'm going to put this speaker back over.